the Acting President of the Republic of Zambia, Her Honor Mrs. W.K. Mtaronarumango MP, the Provincial Minister, Lusaka Province, Mrs. Shiu Muliata MP, the Mayor of Lusaka City, Ms. Chilando Chitangala, the Acting Secretary to the Cabinet, Mr. Patrick Kangwa, the Director General of the Anti-Corruption Commission, Mr. Gilbert Piri, Permanent Secretaries present, heads of private sector institutions and representatives, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, let me thank our guest of honor, the Acting President, for sparing time from her very busy schedule to be part of this important anti-corruption symposium for the private sector. I would also like to thank all of you for finding the time to come and be part of this discussion on fighting corruption with the involvement of the private sector. Guest of honor, the theme for this anti-corruption symposium, preventing corruption through private sector participation, recognizes that the private sector is an important partner in the fight against corruption. This is demonstrated by the number of corruption cases that the Commission has handled over the past years, in which individuals in the private sector have most often colluded with the individuals in the public sector to defraud government of the much needed public resources. In the process, private institutions have been known to budget money to spend on corruption. I'm told the budget line, guest of honor, is sometimes oils and lubricants. You will note historically that the fight against corruption has targeted the public sector officials, leaving out officials in the private sector, or only using them as witnesses against public officials. It is now time to have a holistic approach and work with all sectors to collectively deal with the opportunities for corrupt practices and the prevention thereof. The Commission notes that government is desirous to stimulate economic development through private sector participation and has targeted economic players from small and medium enterprises to large conglomerates such as mines. The 2023 national budget, the 8th National Development Plan, and indeed Goal 16 of the Sustainable Development Goals is premised on promoting peaceful and inclusive societies, providing access to justice for all and building effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. The Sustainable Development Goals contain objectives that speak to economic and human development, but the meaningful realization of these aspirations can only be attained if corruption is curtailed. Madam Guest of Honor, I am aware that no country in our state of economic growth has ever developed from third to first world without first attacking corruption. Evidence abounds. We look at Singapore and the Lee Kuan Yew story, Mahathir Mohamad's Malaysia, General Park's Singapore, and even perhaps remotely our northern neighbors, northeastern neighbors, the Rwandese. Corruption is not only a policing issue, it is an economic strategy. Government has unmistakably and clearly declared in no uncertain terms its stance on corruption. As the Anti-Corruption Commission, it is our legal mandate to ensure that the government's aspiration of zero tolerance to corruption policy is attained. Guests of honor, ladies and gentlemen, you may be aware that Zambia is a state party to a number of international instruments on corruption, such as the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. These instruments set obligation for member states to adhere to prescribed standards for a successful corruption fight. One such standard is the involvement of all stakeholders in the successful fight against corruption, and you, distinguished guests from the private sector, are one such important stakeholder. You may wish to know that currently Zambia is undergoing a peer review under Chapter 2 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which is the Convention Prevention Chapter. One of the most interesting issues under review in this chapter is the private sector involvement in the fight against corruption. Article 12 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption advocates for the need for law enforcement agencies to work together with the private sector players. It advocates for development of corporate anti-corruption safeguards, including conflict checks, disclosure obligations, and accounting and auditing standards. The review therefore provides an opportunity for an assessment on how much work has been put towards private sector involvement in the fight against corruption. Clearly, a lot still needs to be done, and this symposium is one of many steps forward in this regard. Consequently, one of the objectives of this meeting is to come up with the best way to reach out to you, members of the private sector, as important partners in the fight against corruption. We wish to encourage collective action against corruption. We need to collaborate more and form a critical mass to ensure the private sector is insulated from corruption and protected from the negative effects of corruption. The Commission stands ready to work with you in this regard. We are elated to note that some of the private sector players have already made efforts in developing systems to detect and prevent corruption through the anti-bribery and corruption policies and compliance measures. We are aware of sugar, and a number of banks have these policies in place. However, these policies are not supposed to be implemented in isolation, but as a collective effort by all players to ensure that the vice does not thrive. Your views on how best we can work together to fight corruption in your respective industry sector will be most appreciated, be it financial, legal, construction, mining, or indeed manufacturing. This engagement is just the beginning of more engagements to come. We are also aware that corruption is a cost to business and is an unnecessary cost that the private sector does not need. And we know that in collaborating the way we are reducing your cost to business and removing this illegal layer budget line in your statements, financial statements. Allow me to thank some of the entities that have made this meeting possible. The German Development Aid, Konkola Copper Mines, Transparency International Zambia, and Standard Chartered Bank Zambia. Your financial support towards this event is immensely appreciated. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance. Thank you very much.